referred to by name or as Knight or Starfire?
Wait, I don't think this.
Your friend Corey is here to kill Rachel.
Hey everyone, welcome to part 3 of this series, What Was I Thinking? What you just saw was me forgetting to turn off my camera and eating lunch. So I was just thinking how this video is all over the place, or this series, and I have to admit that I have been coming to a point where I'm like, ugh, why am I doing this? It's not good. But remembering I had that footage and putting that together made me laugh a lot, so I guess part of why I'm doing this is to have fun. So I hope you found that funny. I did. Anyway, so what you're gonna see in this video is really the nuts and bolts of how I work. There's not a lot about philosophy or anything like that. It's more like why am I making these decisions? Why is the composition looking like this? So the way I look at it, I have sort of two potential audiences for my channel. I have artists and collectors. And artists might be interested in this to sort of get ideas about how they can themselves work, and collectors would just find it interesting why I make decisions that I make. Or maybe no one will find it interesting at all. There's that possibility too, but I think I'm pretty interesting. Alright, I don't know, maybe. Hopefully you've watched parts of my other videos and you have gotten an idea of what I'm doing, and hopefully this one feels a little bit more focused. And if you like it, please hit the like button, and if you like it, please subscribe. I'm trying to build up my subscribers. It's very early days, I know, but every little bit helps. And give me some feedback. And without further ado, here is part 3 of What Was I Thinking?
So the one thing that I find very fascinating is, as I'm building this, what I'm intending to do when it's finished is create something that looks like it's falling apart. But it's impossible to, well, not impossible, I guess, but I can't conceive of a way for me to actually, make one of these that's whole and pull it apart, other than making a sculpture of one and kind of trying to tear it apart. But my point is when it's finished, it's intended to look like it's raining down on this figure, right? But what I'm doing is I'm building something, not taking it apart. And I'm building something that's intended to look fractured, broken. And I guess that's just making me think about the relationship between something that's whole and something that's broken, and the difference between creation and destruction, I guess. And that's super deep. And I guess I've explored that numerous times without even really thinking about it. So that's kind of fascinating to me. I was on this podcast recently, and we were just talking about art, and a different friend of mine was saying, he's like, why have you chosen this shape? And it looks like an egg, which in a lot of world religions and myths, the egg symbolizes the soul and all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, that's not part of what I'm doing. And I was starting to hint at the idea that nothing's an accident either, and just because I didn't think of it doesn't mean that it's not something that can be attributed to my work. and that it's not, like maybe like that was always somewhere in my unconscious mind, that like when I saw this shape, I was like, wow, that really hits me spiritually or something like that. I mean, who's to say? And it's just taking me several years to acknowledge and identify with something that has been there the whole time. Quite honestly, that sounds hokey to me, but at the same time, I am not a super cynical person, so I just think, why not? Like why not? Why rule that concept out just because it sounds a little hokey or new agey or something? There are reasons why certain symbols pervade our world and various cultures, and I don't think that just because people might attribute a shape with the soul, I'm not saying that that's what I believe, or even that there's any validity to that belief. But the fact that it like is so pervasive is undeniable, and that's, I guess, maybe why acknowledging that that this meaning has validity is, valid. Yeah, that's, again, I don't know. I'm not usually this conceptual. I don't know what I'm talking about. But it would be nice if a couple people said, "Oh, I totally get what you're saying," and kind of not necessarily agree with me, maybe even disagree, but just sort of like say, "That's an interesting thought. Keep it up," or something like that. I don't know. Getting towards the end here of the lines, and one thing that's interesting is this part here. Gonna have to go and maybe add some lines that weren't there before. Alright, so now what I'm gonna do, so put this lady back. Be very careful, that's pretty weak. This here. So, the quandary now is, do I make a totally white space behind her, or do I make it like less saturated? Because like if this is a three-dimensional object, it can be falling on either side. Or do I just do like be really meta and just be like, no, this is two-dimensional, she's two-dimensional, there is no forward or back, so it's going to be white. That's what I'm going to do. I think that it makes the most sense and is the least real. So kind of maybe the most interesting. Yeah, so that's what we'll do. So what I need to do is clearly delineate that. times like these, I wish I had a triangle, a right triangle, because I don't want to make wrong, I don't want to make crooked lines. Hopefully just using the edge of the ruler is going to be what I need to do. So now I'm asking myself, should I just glue it? Might be the best thing to do. So that's what we're gonna do. So let's get her ready to glue. I just don't want to take a chance that I accidentally enter her field, I guess. So just going ahead and gluing her down is like the most surefire way that I won't accidentally have my lines intersect with her. I'm sure there are better techniques in the world for gluing collage, and I guess I wish I knew how to practice them. Just hope this is So now the process of creating this falling lines is literally totally just eyeballing it. I have like sometimes thought like there's got to be a way to approach this more scientifically and more like in a way that, like, taking the actual measurements of all of these missing lines and only creating those lines and like having it be exact. And again, the only way to do that, I think, would be to create it in a computer and literally break off these lines and have them, you know, well, use a computer. We'll just say that.
So, you know, just talking a little bit about this composition, I knew that I kind of liked this image. It's so traditional Japanese looking, and I just wasn't sure how I would incorporate it with the permutation, and so I just saved it for a while and thought about it, and it just like hit me out of nowhere last night that this is what I should do. And it's like, you know, I watched a YouTube video recently from these guys I follow called The Future, and they're really like kind of opposite of how I think most of the time. They're so like well thought out and they're all about branding and design and all this stuff that has interested me, but has like eluded me in so many ways for so long in my life. But they were talking about the easiest or most effective way of like creating something that resonates is to take something old and flip it in a way that like is interesting, or not that is interesting, but like flipping it in a way causes it to be interesting. Like a lot of viral videos are just like, you know, like juxtaposition of two ideas that are like, that then become funny or interesting or profound. And like, what's interesting about this is that it's my own thing. I'm mixing it with something else that makes the whole concept new in a way. And so I don't know, it's just, to me it's like kind of gratifying when I did not have that in mind when I came up with this composition. Like, oh, how can I, you know, make a composition that is, you know, combining something old and something new in an interesting way. Like, that's not at all what happened. But the fact that it falls under that kind of category is gratifying. So I feel like a lot of times I neglect to make little tiny lines. But they should all be at least this wide, right? Like, that's the, although I guess some of these are broken in ways, you know, I guess you could theorize that they're broken, you know, in more ways than are obvious here. They don't have to just be mathematically precise. They could have just cracked on their way down. They could have bumped into each other and cracked further than just their mathematical equal amounts. Does that make sense? The key is, when do you stop? When is enough? When is too much? Is there too much? Visually, I don't know the answer because I've never done it with a computer and like actually measured out like what is the mass of this distributed into this field, you know? And hopefully I'm just close by working from a gut instinct. I like to do just a couple that go outside of the boundary. One more. I feel like I'm getting close. It may also be one of those times where I have to just stop and come back to it to see if my impulse is correct. I also like to make lines from every point. I feel like it creates a subconscious sort of through line so that people can imagine the shape being there.
So, I mean, I had the idea of maybe having the lines go through and like intersect into the collage piece. But I'm really kind of like, enjoying the idea that this is a two-dimensional thing, this is a two-dimensional thing, this is a piece of paper. The minute one of these lines intersects with this, then it becomes 3 dimensions, and like, which is a different decision to make and no less valid, but like I kind of like the idea of like doing what is less sort of my impulse or less obvious to me. Like, I just think it's funnier to think of it as like, oh, I'm doing a little joke of this is all 2-dimensional objects, and I'm very conscious of that fact. Seems like something other artists would do, especially surrealists, collagists, like those kinds of artists. And I like that. So, do you like that? If so, mention it in the comments. All right, I think I'm gonna leave it at this for now and come back after I take a break.